Story 1. Any prescribed medicine that causes physical dependence. People think that because it is prescribed, they are not addicted despite needing to use it daily. Addiction is not inherently bad. Sometimes it is a fair price to pay for medicine that makes you functional. It needs to be destigmatized so that people can be more honest about their consumption habits and manage the risks associated with addiction. Story 2. Heroin. It is not just a matter of trying it once and becoming addicted. It is like chasing a dragon and then realizing you are addicted. Story 3. Anything that stimulates your dopamine receptors and brings you pleasure can be addictive. This includes drugs, alcohol, exercise, seeking attention, social media, gaming, reading, crafting, nail biting, sex, music, spending money, making money, gambling, biking, swimming, and running. The human brain is designed to crave or continue any behavior that produces feelings of happiness. Addiction is a consuming need to repeat the behavior that causes a positive release of chemicals in the brain and body. Anything done to excess can become an addiction, and they all stem from the same cause. The unfortunate truth is that anything can be addictive. Story 4. Being angry. I know some people who love to argue, pick fights, and discuss subjects that make them mad. Story 5. Money. Much is said about alcohol, sex, and drugs, but the real issue is people who believe they are worth so much that stealing from their workers is considered normal. This causes far more problems compared to one person being addicted to something. One person addicted to being a billionaire who wants more will lead to many of the problems we see today. Let's be real, no one is worth billions due to hard, honest work. They are skilled at stealing, nothing more, nothing less. Story 6. For me, caffeine, nicotine, and prescription painkillers used to be important. I drink about 4 or more cups of coffee a day. Story 7. Pity. I have known people who lived in a state of perpetual victimhood, where every day something new and terrible was happening to them that was completely out of their control, according to them. They surrounded themselves with people who were sensitive to their feelings and pandered to them no matter what. This reinforced the idea that if they wanted positive attention from people they cared about, they needed to have something going wrong to gain pity. This encouraged them to seek out negatives to use later as a tool. These types of people are exhausting to deal with. If you have one around you, be a friend and offer some kind, hard truths every now and then. It will be better for both of you. Story 8. The psychological aspect of alcoholism. I first considered this framing of alcoholism when hearing a line in the Taylor Swift song, Fortnite. It struck me as both impossible for someone of her stature, yet totally possible for someone in such need of escape. It made me look at my own drinking. I had built up to 6 drinks a night. I wasn't out all night drinking, and I wasn't hungover for work. But there was something distinctly less healthful about me, more numb to get up and go. I wasn't craving it, yet I never dropped below 3 drinks per night out of pure habit. I eventually stopped buying alcohol entirely and replaced the habit with Sprite Zero. I'm a big, fit guy with a great metabolism, so I could indeed handle 6 drinks a night. There has been no withdrawal. But it was an unhealthy habit, and I'm glad I'm not drinking anymore. Story 9. I wish I had accessed Reddit earlier in life. I was terribly shy and never talked to anyone. I could have learned a lot of important social cues. My parents kind of raised me feral. As long as I was not doing anything drastic, they left me alone. I was an avid reader and read about anything I could learn regarding manners. Story 10. A video game, when it is first released, can be addictive for about 1 to 2 months, depending on how often you are able to play it. Story 11. Reddit, pornography, probable cheating, nicotine, certain drugs. Addicted to getting high through various sources. Story 12. Gambling. One win or turning $5 into $100 and your mind goes, I can do this again and again and get some money. In the end, it makes you go broke. Story 13. It is easy to become addicted to smartphones because they can be used anywhere and anytime. Also, when you are scrolling on social media, no one will look at you strangely, as they would if you were smoking. That is why I find smartphone addiction to be worse than any other addiction, except drugs, which are much harder to overcome. However, the threshold for smartphone addiction is lower. Story 14. Gambling or card collecting. I honestly think they are the same as a card collector. You either get the chase card and make your money back, or you lose most of your money. Story 15. Nostalgia. Believing that therapy is valuable only because they were diagnosed, instead of actively engaging in the therapeutic process. Story 16. Drugs and alcohol. I never tried that stuff in high school. I started socially doing it in university. When I first did it in university, I never thought I could get hooked on it. But after I graduated and had way more free time, I started occasionally using it, and then it just became something I did whenever I had free time by myself. Before I knew it, it was almost every day. Even the most wholesome people can get hooked on it. Story 17. Something people can easily become addicted to is scrolling on social media. It provides quick hits of dopamine, feels harmless at first, and suddenly you have lost hours without even realizing it. Story 18. The big issue right now is online sports betting conducted from your telephone. It is surpassing everything else and ruining lives. You can be assured that anything the state promotes related to gambling will be totally addictive and damaging. Online gambling, sports betting, cannabis, and lotteries in New Jersey are harmful to your health and your wealth. The politicians who promote these activities have a particular type of evil mind. Story 19. Online validation includes likes, comments, and views. It is a dopamine loop people fall into without realizing how much it shapes their self-worth. Story 20. Short-form video content. I swear to God, Instagram Reels, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts are designed to maximize dopamine release and minimize attention span. Story 21. Drinking a beer and having a smoke outside the poker room, deliberating on this question while multitasking. Story 22. Well, obviously being on the phone too much. Before someone gets predictably offended, I am not talking about right now at this moment, but while at school, at work, and out in public, walking without paying attention to where you are going. Story 23. Pain medication. I promise you, the pain you are feeling now is far less than what those medications will do to you. Refuse them if you are ever offered or prescribed them. Story 24. For some reason, I fall in love very easily. I think it is because my wife passed away in January. Story 25. Someone's presence. Heartbreak is the most painful thing to me. When you lose a dog and find yourself looking for them or calling their name before you remember what happened. Story 26. There is not one thing that anyone can easily get addicted to. Addiction is a component of one's mind. Addiction occurs when the brain has something programmed as a need, as a necessary requirement to function. If addiction were contained in the substance or activity, every person who ingested opioids would be addicted. Every person who tried gambling would be addicted. Story 27. Alcohol. I did not realize I had a problem until I was vomiting from withdrawal rather than from hangovers. Story 28. I had a serious addiction to Coca-Cola when I was 17 that lasted until I was 20. I am 25 now and will never consume it again. Story 29. Alcohol is legal and regulated to prevent issues like fentanyl contamination in heroin. It is affordable, socially acceptable, and addictive. Story 30. Those small compliments, like when someone says, "Oh, you smell good," allow you to relive that moment over and over in your mind. Story 31. I see some posts saying crack cocaine and heroin are definitive traps on first use. I would say this was not at all the case for me. I tried each drug around 3 to 5 times over the years and was absolutely not hooked. Not even particularly looking to try again. I am addicted to nicotine, though, and a moderate, occasional alcohol and drug user. As is often overlooked, addiction comes from the user and the context or reason for consumption, not the substance itself. Story 32. Anything that brings a rush or a release of dopamine is part of the addiction problem. Story 33. This might be a controversial answer, but cannabis. I feel like people think it is the least addictive drug you can get, but do not underestimate your reliance on easy good feelings. I know I am constantly monitoring my use, so I do not get too dependent on it. Story 34. Caffeine. Fun fact, Caffeine addiction is not recognized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders used by psychologists and psychiatrists due to a lack of studies. But caffeine withdrawal is recognized, causing symptoms such as headaches. Story 35. Coffee? I waited to be 2 months off from my work and at home to start my anti-coffee process. I do not drink it anymore and feel great since. Story 36. Gambling. This is coming from a native of Las Vegas. Many people underestimate how quickly they can get hooked. When they become addicted, they change into someone else. I have seen adults throw tantrums worse than a toddler who had their iPad taken away because they could not play a certain machine. I do not work for a casino directly, just a store slot room, but we have had people wet themselves because they did not want to get up from the machine. Story 37. I must say YouTube Shorts, alcohol is too expensive. I get high from just reading the word codeine. Pornography is boring. If you see one, you have seen them all. Masturbation is tiresome. Driving fast is dull if you have ever been in a fighter jet. Story 38. Gambling. Do not gamble, everyone. This advice comes from someone who recently quit their job in the sportsbook and casino industry. Even if you somehow are a net winner, which is almost impossible, you will eventually be limited to betting very small amounts on the markets where you are beating the bookmaker. It is addictive, unfair, and disturbing how these companies operate. Story 39. Cocaine. Regular old booger sugar, white powdered variety. Usually it was crack, not powder, that made people instantly addicted. But an ex who never did any drugs tried a pair of lines at a neighbor's party. She almost instantly wanted more. An hour later, she was chopping and cutting lines like a 1970s disco groupie. Things were fun back at home, but she would stick a glass to the wall trying to hear if our partying neighbor in the next apartment was still partying, hoping she would get invited. She was like Pavlov's dog every time he played his party anthem, "Friends in Low Places." I insisted she never do it again for her physical and mental health, and thankfully she listened. Scary. Story 40. Television and YouTube are things we use for our children as parents too. We often let them watch just to keep them quiet. This is one of the worst things for children. They should not watch any television until they are at least 10 years old. Story 41. Depends on the person. Whatever stimulates that dopamine spot just right could quite literally be anything. Story 42. Alcohol. Since being diagnosed with cirrhosis last year and becoming sober, you realize how much you spend, and liquor is everywhere. Story 43. Sometimes I think the addiction to many things is more about being stuck in a pleasurable routine than the thing itself. I know that's not true for everyone, and we are all different, but speaking for myself, smoking was like this. Quitting was only hard because it felt like what I do, and it would be time to walk, and that's when I'd have a cigarette or a bar, a concert, and so on. When I finally wanted to quit, I simply stopped, no withdrawal symptoms, just cold turkey. Alcohol was similar. I fell into a routine of working all day, cooking dinner, walking the dog, then having a craft beer, and it became a daily thing. Thinking I needed to cut it out was hard because that's how I would unwind when the sun went down after a long day. Finally, I told myself my health is more important and changed my routine from craft beer at night to non-sugar ginger ale and frozen blueberries. Now when it's nighttime, I need that ginger ale and berries. At least it's healthier. Story 44. Easier than people realize. Gambling. I have lived in Las Vegas since I was a kid. I never gambled much at all, even though I worked in a casino. After our house was robbed, I found myself staying after work and gambling until I literally had no money left. I did not want to go home and did not realize I had post-traumatic stress disorder. Fortunately, I recovered eventually and now I do not gamble at all. Story 45. Reese's Cups. Hands down, best enjoyed with a cold glass of milk. I finally broke my habit and have not had one in 6 months. Not to say I do not dream about it. Story 46. Since nobody said it yet, self-harm. One time you're just doing it to control your emotions or feel something other than numbness, and then next thing you know, you can't even function without it, not even for a few hours. The worst part is that the amount you used to do stops being enough, so it gets progressively more extreme as time goes on. It's a dangerous addiction, and you shouldn't get into it under any circumstances. Withdrawals make your emotional instability and numbness even worse, making you think that the problem, self-harm, is the solution. It is not, and it will make it much worse. Also, after you do it and the happy effect wears off, you feel like complete garbage. The way you have to hide it and lie about it, especially to the ones you love, is terrible. The cravings are also very annoying to deal with. You will still get them years after you have stopped, just as strong as they were back then. I remember having to wash my entire forearm with cold water to create a numbing sensation, just to get rid of the scratchy feeling I seemed to get when I had not done it for a long time, a feeling that only a sharp object could relieve. Even then, it was not fully gone. It was just easier to deal with. Also, self-harm can turn into fatally wounding yourself accidentally or spiral down into suicide. It has been years since that point. Never again. Story 47. Controversial opinion. Despite the fact I am pro-legalize marijuana, marijuana is addictive in the same way people can become alcoholics. I say this because I was that marijuana burnout in college and it never helped with my anxiety issues no matter the strain. I was mostly chasing a high that was never there to begin with. It turns out marijuana does nothing to me except make me more paranoid. Still pro-marijuana though. It just took me a long time to realize that marijuana was becoming too much of my life. Story 48. Vaping. Nicotine is already very addictive. Vapes make it more accessible and socially acceptable. They taste great, deliver a high concentration, are easy to hide, and if you choose not to hide them, most people will not judge you harshly. I miss vaping. Story 49. I've been addicted to many things before I got sober. The worst ones are nicotine, cocaine, and opiates. Alcohol and methamphetamine are also very harmful, but you often feel compelled to keep using them, challenging yourself not to get addicted. Cocaine, tobacco, and opiates hook you from the first taste. I have never had a problem with cocaine. I thought of it like mild methamphetamine. However, I have seen people destroy their lives very quickly because of cocaine. Compared to these major substances, cannabis does not even register. Story 50. Thinking of many awkward and annoying questions to ask their friends and family, thus driving them extremely insane. Story 51. Everyone has a vice. Thank God. I was never brought up on sugar or caffeine. However, I was raised in a fairly strict Christian household. Side effects? Yes, I am addicted to sexual activity. My family has no idea. I was very discreet with a few partners in my teenage years, and while in college, my numbers increased. Now, back home as a graduate, I have to figure out how to adjust to my surroundings. I know 90% of people enjoy sex. I enjoy it to the point that I have written improv role plays and acted them out, focusing on the storyline. Some friends have said they want to write greeting cards for Hallmark, while I would want to write plots for adult entertainment. It is not just the intercourse but the whole industry that caters to it. It is legal activity that can have several consequences and can become an addiction. Hopefully, it will not be my downfall. Story 52. Fishing stimulates dopamine release and is more socially acceptable than drug use. However, drugs are cheaper and require less time. Story 53. Making money. There is a reason side hustle subscriptions are growing more popular, such as our /side hustle gold, where people's sole purpose is to think of new ways to make even more money outside of their actual jobs. Story 54. That Galaxy gas. I cannot believe it is being sold, and I do not think people realize what it does to their health because the packaging is all pretty. Story 55. Honestly, tobacco and cigarettes are very difficult to quit. I smoked for 15 years and quit 8.5 years ago. Do not start, kids. Story 56. What is something someone can easily become addicted to? Sexual compatibility. If you connect physically and mentally with a person in bed, it can be very satisfying. Story 57. Nicotine is one of the most fast-acting addictive substances, but it leaves your system quickly. That is part of the problem with it, as it is also a poison. Story 58. What is something someone could easily get addicted to? To fit the whole could have, should have, would have premise, I would say coffee. Story 59. Alcohol. It will hit you when you least expect it. It will never let go until you muster the courage. Story 60 Mobile Games. My mom has been playing a farming game for years, and she talks about it like it is a real farm at times. I do not understand the addiction personally. I do play mobile games, but I could not dedicate hours to them. Console games are much better as there is far more content, and you feel more of an accomplishment finishing a level or a race in them than you do repeatedly performing the same tasks in a mobile game over and over again. Story 61. Being good friends with your ex and holding on to hope despite becoming a different person and practically a pseudo-partner, hoping that you will be with them and it does not happen. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.